would emerge from a single ancestral stock. In fact, this gentle introduction to the power of selection to wreak biological change wasn't just a literary device. Darwin had set out to study domestication himself because he believed that it would cast light on the mechanism of evolution more generally, on how wild plants and animals could become gradually modified. He wrote, "It seemed to me probable that a careful study of domesticated animals and cultivated plants would offer the best chance of making out this obscure problem. Nor," he added, almost with a glint in his eye, "have I been disappointed." After discussing the effects of artificial selection, Darwin could then go on to introduce his key concept of natural selection as the mechanism behind the evolution of life on the planet, the unthinking process that would, over time, propagate modifications and grind out not just new strains, but entirely new species. Reading his book today, the word artificial trips us up. Firstly, there's the other meaning of artificial, where it's synonymous with fake. That wasn't the sense in which Darwin was applying the word. He meant artificial as in by artifice. But even then, there's a knowingness implied by this word which overplays the role of conscious intent in the process of domestication of species. Modern plant and animal breeding may be carried out with careful, deliberate aims in mind, but the earlier history of our liaisons with the species that have become our major allies reveals a shocking lack of any planning. So we could try to come up with a new word for artificial, but there's another problem. Given that we now accept the fundamental role of natural selection in evolution, given that Mr. Darwin doesn't need to persuade the majority of us of this biological reality, do we actually need a separate description for the way that humans have affected the evolution of domesticated species? Describing artificial and natural selection separately helped Darwin to build his argument and to introduce a challenging new idea, but the distinction is actually false. It doesn't really matter that it's us humans, rather than the physical environment or other species, that are mediating the assortment of individuals into those more or less likely to successfully reproduce. You wouldn't make this distinction for any other species. Take the selective pressure exerted by honeybees on flowers, which leads to changes in those flowers over time, making them more attractive to their pollinators. The colours, shapes and scents of flowers are not designed to delight our senses. They have evolved to entice in their winged allies. Have the honeybees been effecting artificial selection? Isn't this just bee-mediated natural selection? Perhaps when it comes to our own influence on domesticated species, instead of artificial selection, it's better, although admittedly slightly clunkier, to think of it as human-mediated natural selection. Natural selection works its wonders by weeding out particular variants, while others survive and reproduce, passing genes on to the next generation. Artificial or human-mediated natural selection often works in the same way, as farmers and breeders reject certain plants or animals which aren't as docile, productive, strong, tall or sweet as others. Darwin described this negative selection in The Origin. He wrote, "When a race of plants is once pretty well established, the seed raisers do not pick out the best plants, but merely go over the seed beds and pull up the rogues, as they call the plants that deviate from the proper standard. With animals, this kind of selection is in fact also followed, for hardly anyone is so careless as to allow his worst animals to breed. By pulling up the rogues, sifting out the animals that we don't want to breed on, or even just looking after certain animals better than others, humans have become powerful agents of natural selection. We've roped in a great variety of plants and animals to become our allies in the game of life. Yet, as we'll see, sometimes this taming seems to have come about almost by accident, and sometimes it appears as though the plants and the animals are actually domesticating themselves. Perhaps we're not as all-powerful as we once believed ourselves to be. Even when we're setting out deliberately to break in a species, to make it more useful to us, we're really only unlocking a natural latent potential to be tame. The deep histories of plants and animals that are very familiar to us today take us to strange and exotic locations. It's a good time to be tracing these stories. Arguments have raged on over how each domesticated species sprang into being, from a single origin, a single discrete centre of domestication, or from a wider geographic area, as different wild species or subspecies were tamed